Good evening. Good to see you again. Welcome. I guess this is who's supposed to hear what comes out tonight. It's always interesting to me. Sometimes things happen like last week where I ran into the guy on the beach and the class is real clear, and other times I have no idea what it's about. Before the class 3 weeks ago, after we did the first two talks on movies and dreams, I was led to Joe Goldsmith's series of tapes on living between two worlds. And I was really led there. So I pulled those tapes out and I've been listening to them a little bit over the past time because that certainly is true about all of us. Everybody who's coming here has one foot in what Jesus called this world and one foot in what he called my kingdom, or God's world, or whatever you want to call that consciousness. And Joel did a whole series of tapes about that, which are, of course, really quite good. Not a surprise. It was in 1964 that he held those classes, and that was the last year he taught, so these are really at the top of his teaching, and they're also pretty much where this group of people are. We all very definitely still have one foot in what Jesus called this world. We spend most of our time in this world. We'd like to spend most of our time in my kingdom. And that is what I think all this series of talks is about, as long as they go on, is about becoming aware of what my kingdom is, becoming more and more aware of my kingdom and getting more and more of my kingdom active in our life and in our consciousness, spending more time there, or getting more of us there, or however you want to say it. This world is the human world, of course, human consciousness, and that's all based on I, little I, the small I. As Joel would say, I call me I, and you call you I, and each of us has this concept of a separate, distinct I. And I thinks it's separate from all the other little I's, and I thinks it's separate from God. And I has a number of concepts and opinions that are conditioned into it and taught to it and trained to it. And these conditions and opinions are based on where I lives and how old I is and what I's religion is and what I's education is and what I's ethnic basis is and what I's mother was like and all these factors. And what I do, little I do, Lee does, is I look out at the world and immediately, completely enshroud my eyes, cover my eyes with all my concepts and opinions. all the concepts and opinions come up, and I have concepts about you and about this and about that and opinions, and all these things come up. And they're like blinders. They prevent me from seeing the reality when I'm in the Leelaa and the human consciousness. And of course the problem is that I, Lee, think the world is like that. I think I'm right. I think the world's like that. I think that politician is a scoundrel, and that politician is a saint, and that country is bad, and this country is good, and all these things. I have all these opinions and conditions that are conditioned into me, and I think that that's the way the world is. And of course, you are exactly like that too, and have your set of conditions and your concepts and your set of opinions, and you think the world is the way you see it. And so do those people in the good country, and those people in the bad country have their own idea of how it is. And this is the morass of human consciousness of this world. We use our five senses and observe the materiality, and we see duality, and we see good and evil, and right and wrong, and health and sickness, wealth, lack, all the opposites of duality. And we think that's how the world is. And confronted with the world like that, we're powerless. And so we invent a God because we're afraid. We're afraid of the things we see in this world. We're afraid of wars, and we're afraid of germs, and we're afraid of lack, and we're afraid of discord, and we're afraid of big people, we're afraid of whatever, and we're afraid of weather and tidal waves and earthquakes. And so we invent gods. Now, lots of religions are down to inventing one God, and this God is a God we can pray to and supplicate to save highly. So I've invented this God, and I pray to this God to bring its, and I'm fairly smart intellectually, so I know God's spiritual. So what I'm praying for is God to bring its spiritual grace into this material world and save this I, Lee, which of course doesn't really exist. And that process has a hit or miss result, which is based on karma and how the Leelaa plays out, and has absolutely nothing to do with the efficacy of my prayer or God's potency or anything like that. So that's where we start out playing. And at some point, we've played long enough, and we get lifted a little bit, and we begin to become conscious. And we begin to become aware of the presence of God. And we begin to become aware of Big I. The Big I, the one Big I. We begin to become aware that little by little, we don't know what this means, but slowly we learn that we become aware of truth, which is that, God, this is the capital God, not the God that the little I is invented, but God is consciousness and is all of creation and is expressing itself as individual consciousness. And the individual consciousness is what we can call the individual consciousness Big I. Little I is the human consciousness. Big I is the God expressed as the individual consciousness. Now, it sounds like there's a lot of big I's, but there's really only one big I, because although God is expressed as the individual consciousness, God is one, and it is one that is expressed in this way. And so the big I is really one in that sense. The whole thing becomes difficult to talk about because we think with our human minds and our human senses, and we don't have any idea what allness really means. But Joel talks about the tree of life and talks about, the tree and the root and the branches and the twigs and the leaves, and that actually each leaf is tree as well as leaf. And that sort of gives us a picture of each individual consciousness is I and is the I of God. But it breaks down because each individual consciousness, each big I, which is individual consciousness, is all of God, not part of God. God doesn't chop itself up and spread itself out amongst the leaves. All of God is in each leaf. All of God is in each individual consciousness. And this is a concept that we can't see with our intellect. But in any event, we begin to become aware that there is such a God, and we begin to become aware that there is such a big I, and we become aware of the two states. And this is what the living between two worlds is talking about. It's talking about I, little I, when I'm in my human consciousness. And when I can get quiet, when I am quiet, then I can be aware of I, big I, the individual expression of God that I am. And when we start doing this, the whole picture changes. While I'm in big I, there is no little I. And there's therefore no one generating concepts and opinions. So there are no concepts and opinions that are putting the blinders on my vision. And I can begin to see clearly for the first time. The true vision, seeing clearly, the vision that I see now is not one that little I generate. It's not one that there's any sense of generating it or creating it like I created my opinions and created my concepts. This vision is given to me, and this vision appears. It appears in the silence. It may be the still small voice, or it may be the intuition, or it may be an insight, or it may be an aha, or a click, or an understanding. But as I abide in the presence of God, my vision clears and I start seeing the truth about all these situations that I was with before. Instead of feeling separate and thinking I'm separate from you and from God, I see oneness. And instead of dealing with good and evil and right and wrong and all this sort of stuff, I experience the love that is God, and I experience it flowing through me and between you and me. And instead of wealth or lack or abundance or lack or things like that, I experience allness. The allness in the sense that I was saying a minute ago about all of God is in each individual I. So there's no longer wealth and lack and abundance and terms like that. All there is allness. Allness right here, right now. And there being no little I, Lee, there's no fear. I experience that God is the substance of all form, that God is the substratum of the universe, the fabric of the universe, the underlying reality of everything. But back to God is the substance of all form. And so the nature of every form I see is God nature, since God is the substance of all form. Joel would use the example we like to talk about mahogany. And if you have mahogany carved into a desk, and mahogany carved into a duck, and mahogany carved into a box, the real nature of the duck and the box and the desk is mahogany. And the attributes that they will all share is the attributes of mahogany. The fact is that one is not a bird and one is not a useful this and the other one is not a useful that or a place to put stuff, as much as they're all mahogany and they're all wood and they're all reddish and they all smell like mahogany and they all have a certain level of hardness and a certain ability, a certain kindling point. All the things have as their real nature mahogany. Well, in that same sense, all the forms that we see have as their true nature, as their real nature, the Sanskrit word is their swarupa, have as their nature God. And so the nature of everything, having God nature, there are no destructive forms, for example. So the fear of germs or war or bombs or tidal waves disappears because God is not destructive, so there are no destructive forms. If I flip back into the I Lee, then I can see forms that appear to me to be destructive. But if I'm abiding, in in the consciousness of I God, then I know that that's all illusory. And knowing that it's all illusory, none of those things will be able to have an impact or affect capital I, Lee. spiritual healing is not the result of bringing God to a little I and fixing the little I. Spiritual healing is bringing the little I to the practitioner consciousness, the spiritual consciousness, which lifts the little I to the big I consciousness. And in the big I consciousness, there are no destructive forms, and so germs are impotent, or whatever the complaint is. There are no unharmonious forms, so the appearance has to conform to the consciousness that is the result now of the big I being the one where the focus is, rather than the little I. The consciousness of the client has been lifted from this world to my kingdom. That's what the work of a practitioner really is. So the spiritual practice is to work on abiding, I like that word abiding more in my kingdom, abiding more in God consciousness. Being aware of your big I-ness more. Abiding in God and being aware of your big I-ness are synonymous. Two different ways of saying the same thing. When you're abiding in I, the definition of prayer changes. There's no longer anything to pray for. When you're abiding in I, that is prayer. That's exactly what Joel refers to as prayer. The communion of my big I with the absolute God consciousness. Prayer can't happen from I-Lee. I-Lee can't pray successfully. Can't do anything that we would correctly call prayer. But big I can abide in God and have the experience which is the prayerful experience. Then the more we do that, the more the picture changes, because all of the attributes that we talked about that little I had are diminishing, and all the attributes that are associated with the big I are increasing. It's like the more we do it, the more grace there is, but that's not true. The grace was always infinite, but the more time we spend abiding in God, the more grace we become aware of. It's like I mentioned before, the funnel and the spout. What's happening is the spout is expanding, the spout is getting wider, the pipeline to God is getting wider and wider. The amount of flow that of the infinite flow that we experience is increasing. So it appears as if we're getting more grace. In fact, what we're doing is we're experiencing more of the grace that was always here. So way to deal with living between two worlds is to work on abiding in my kingdom more. I mean, obviously, the way to deal with what that says is that the way to deal with living between two worlds is get out of this one and into that one, But the way to get out of this one and into that one is to practice abiding in God more. Take more and more opportunities to practice in God, practice abiding in God, become aware of what things are little I, like fear and belief in germs and belief in war and belief in evil and belief in good and belief in sickness and belief in health and belief in any of these things. Be aware that judgment is an attribute of little I. Jesus' admonition to judge not by appearances is exactly about this. Don't believe the appearance. If you see an evil man, that's not possible. That's an appearance. And since God is the substance of all form, and God's nature is the nature of everything, and God is not evil, there is no such thing as an evil man. But in the human world, in the little I world, where I have judgments and opinions and concepts, there are things that I judge or have the opinion are evil. If when I am judging an appearance, and it's easier to get triggered by the ones that we consider evil or bad or uncomfortable or whatever, but if when I see such an appearance, a sick person, if I can get still and go within and ask, what is the truth here? And get quiet and listen, then I will have, my consciousness will be lifted and I will understand what the truth is of this situation. And the evil person, or the sickness, and let's take sickness, the sickness will not be sickness to me. I will know that what's here is not a sick being, but what's here is another example of spiritual perfection. Another specific expression of God as individual I, but containing the allness and the perfection and all the attributes of God. And often, if I get quiet enough and listen carefully enough, the picture will reflect that. Especially if the person who is appearing to be sick has aligned their consciousness with the consciousness or if they themselves are going within. But if they have aligned themselves with the consciousness which is going within and asking to be shown the truth about this, then often there is what we would call a healing, which is actually not a healing, it's a revelation of the truth, of the reality of the situation. So, practicing abiding is another term for developing a healing consciousness, or working on developing a healing consciousness is another way of saying practicing abiding. think that's all said. Let's open it up and see if there's any questions or comments or anything anybody wants to share. Or we can sit in silence and go within and ask to be shown the truth about this situation.
I have a question. How come everything sucks? I'm just kidding. But, there's, like, I don't have anyone I can talk about this work with outside of here, except for people, because I don't socialize with anyone that comes here. So, if I talk about this out there, then I'll just get, I mean, it's kind of pointless to even talk about it. And, except those that are living it. Because there's a lot of people that read this stuff that aren't living it, that will just say, well, it says over here and over here and over here, and I'm like, I don't want to argue them. So, the more I do this, the more it's just best if I just shut up everywhere I go and don't say anything. But then, that's all I'm doing. And I want to, I want to go out and do things. But, I'm confused, stuck between what the kid wants to do and what, like in a scripting kid context, which this is the same context. The little I being the kid. Like I was at work, there's this one girl there, and I'm always talking about, I try to do things to be accepted. I do unacceptable things in order to be accepted, but I think they're acceptable, but they're not. And so all she goes, boy, you have issues. I want to forget it. I don't want to, And what she did is she read the script, which is, I wasn't being accepted because I was talking about, because of what I said. So the frustrating part is just being in fellowship, because I went and did this fellowship stuff recently, all these fellowship meetings and, hanging at people's houses, and I just don't want to be around them. So then what? When I go home, now I'm sitting in my house. And I just sit quietly, and then I don't, I'm too young to be doing this. I should be angry and throwing rocks or something. So it's just confusing for me.
Yeah, I hear that. And, that's transition.
I really relate to what you're saying because I don't talk about this kind of stuff except, there's 2 or 3 people that I know of, and I don't hang out with those people all the time either. And the hard part for me is there's this some part of me that feels like if I'm not chatting it up, I'm not living. And I have to get into this more mature self that can go to that abide in the eye place. That chatty part isn't the one that's abiding in the eye, And it's not, and so that the thing is, I don't have to be in that 24/7. I just got to visit there periodically throughout the day and remember to abide in the eye. And then no matter what I'm doing or where I'm at, I have this level of comfort going on. And then the second part was, I try to make it like a little game where I can, the thing is not about to talk about this, but to demonstrate it. which is obviously a huge difference. So it's to find little creative ways that I can demonstrate this stuff without having to tell anybody what I'm doing, which is kind of ego stuff anyways, to have to, tell somebody about your spiritual work. So to find little creative ways to just demonstrate it, and also to find ways, if I do want to introduce certain topics, because I do, to find ways to talk about them that are a little bit more accessible to people, that don't set me so apart from. And I just try to make it like a little game. Like, how can I find ways to introduce things that I'm talking about in not a bragging kind of a way, but a way that's like interesting to other people who aren't doing the same kind of thing. But I really relate. That's kind of how I'm working on it.
That's nice.
Certainly, if you had, a kid who wants to play, you'll have to play. It's not like we have to sit at home in the silence all the time. Nowhere does it say we have to stay home. Nowhere does it say you can't go dancing. Nowhere does it say you can't have fun. You can't go to Disneyland. You can't ride the new rides out at Magic Mountain. All those things, can be done as a spiritual adult, not perhaps specifically in that consciousness in the moment, but taking care of the kid, raising the kid, because that's part of your ongoing work, part of the transition process. When the kid's gone, then you can stay in the abiding consciousness, but as long as there's a kid, you won't be able to. If you are in the I consciousness, if you are in my kingdom, when you are abiding in that consciousness, that doesn't say anything at all about what you're doing physically. You could be in that consciousness while you're dancing, or while you're giving a talk, or while you're having dinner with people, chatting about in-laws, or, while you are in God consciousness, the body will continue to do whatever it came here to do. And it may be perfectly social, or it may not, depending on its nature. But you can abide in the I and not talk about abiding in the I or about spiritual truth. There's never any need to talk about spiritual truth except in a classroom situation.
Right, because when you're talking about it, you're not doing it.
And discussing it does not clarify it. What clarifies spiritual truth is abiding in the I, nothing else. So there's no reason to talk about spiritual truth except in a class relationship. Yeah, please.
I was reading Joel's principle about spiritual secrecy, and it kind of touches on that also. And it talks about our intention. Like if our intention to share our spiritual truth, our spiritual awareness, or what we practice spiritually, is to impress the small I, or to impress other human beings, then we're coming from the wrong intention. Because we put more importance on impressing others than impressing God. And if we are truly living these principles, it will be self-evident to others around us.
Absolutely. And while you're in that little I trying to impress people, whatever truth you're imparting will not be the truth. Because you will not be in the consciousness of truth. And the impartation of truth is an exchange of consciousness, not an exchange of words. So you can't impart truth from an ego position. But you can, if you have just heard a new truth and have not taken it inside and let it grow within you until it's your truth, you can lose it by bringing it out too soon and getting it laughed at or rebutted or whatever. So it's potentially quite dangerous to voice truth and at best a no-op, which sort of takes all the wind out of trying to want to talk about truth, unless you're in a spiritually an ordained teaching situation. And by ordained, I mean that the relationship between you and whoever has come to you is in that relationship where they want to share or partake of your consciousness, and then you don't ever decide what it is you want to impart. You let them draw from you what it is they need to hear.
The example that I'm thinking of, where this has happened to me, I can identify it as resistance behavior, and I always get my script read.
Absolutely.
Because I'm a kid.
Sure. It seems like it would be really a service to give people some truth and help them, shape up their lives. But it doesn't work that way. You can't be of service. You can't walk up to somebody and tell them the truth and change their life.
Well, you even say in the book, don't do that because it'll be your kid trying to save their kid and you get script read.
That's right. Get script read because,
And then their kid will just go, you're an idiot.
And even when the fixing thing goes away, and you're not trying to fix them, but you're trying to tell them something about you that's not your demonstration,
right.
It's still resistance behavior.
Yeah.
It's like I'm trying to tell you something because obviously I'm not demonstrating it, so I need to tell you.
right.
Right.
Which is the case they're saying they're totally baffled because you're not demonstrating.
You're a contradiction.
Yeah, you're a contradiction.
That's exactly what was said to me.
Right.
Well, I told a joke.
In your parenting, right?
Right.
It doesn't matter what you say.
Right.
It only matters what you do.
I mean,
Nobody's paying attention to anything you say. They're watching what you do.
either you are a light or you are not. And if you are a light, you are shining on them all to the extent of your brightness. And they are seeing your light to the extent that their eyes are open. And it's a perfect match. And I don't care how bright you are, if their eyes are closed, they're not going to be impressed. You know? And if their eyes are open, what can you possibly say?
Well,
Hey, son, tell me about your life.
yeah.
You know? So,
Well, a lot of friends say that to me about you, and they'll go, well, I don't like that guy. And they don't know you. And I say, well, I'll go, look, he's the most loving man I've ever met in my life. And I've been in a lot of meetings, a lot of fellowship, and that's the reason why I love him. And they'll go, well, I just don't see it. And then I go, well, that's about as far as I can go.
everybody sees me according to where they're at,
Right.
just as everybody sees you according to where they're at.
Right.
But they see me, you know,
And
some people find me very distant, and some people find me very available, and some people think I'm intimidating. And, yeah, you know, I just have no idea what people are going to think of me, but it's very clear to me that I'm reflecting to them what those opinions and concepts that we were talking about right at the start. The little I forms has opinions and concepts. And some people find my quietness intimidating. And the reason it's intimidating to them is because if they were that quiet, they'd be plotting. Or whatever their truth is, right?
well,
Right?
right.
It's that kind of a game.
I have another thing. When I was in another state, I was sponsored. I had 5. So my reputation was very different out here. I was sponsoring. I had 5.
We're older and we're wiser.
Well, it's different. I had 5 people a week asking me to sponsor them. You know, people watch me get sober. And I started, a young people's group, and I was like the Pied Piper, and all these, I was like the group meeting and everything. And, I was like really into the big book and all this stuff, helping, and I had like tons of sponsees. And I come out here, and the context, I don't want to say the context is different, but things are different. So then I started doing this work, and this guy asked me the other day, he said, well, what about helping others? And this kid just called me just now. He's 18, I just spent an hour and a half with him.
Yeah.
And, I'm always getting these like really messed up, you're saying that the only people can see your light, or whatever. And I have a light shining with whatever strength it is, and I'm sure it's just that. But then I'm like, why over there I got like all this going on, and over here,
You're a very different person, and the reason you came out here was to do whatever it is you're doing out here. And and if really sick people are coming to you for your light, maybe it's because they see a healing consciousness. Do you suppose?
could be, I don't know.
I mean, I'm not saying they're a reflection of you.
Right.
I'm saying the people that see, the people that you have what they need will come to you. Okay? And going out and being of service, going out and doing good, going out and saving people or getting your sponsee count up or anything like that doesn't do anybody any good, The people will come to you
That's what's happening.
who you have what they need. And it's not even what they want, it's what they need. I used to watch for years. It was so funny because it was just so graphic for me. Every time my consciousness would go up a level, I'd have an insight or a breakthrough or something, 3 babies would go away and 3 new people would ask me to sponsor them. And it was always 3s, just, like God was laying a 2x4 upside my head just to make sure I noticed, never anything other than 3. But 3 would go away and 3 would ask me to sponsor them. And what that meant is that there were 3 that could now hear what the new person, what the new consciousness was, and there were 3 who were not going to do that work. And so the right people are coming to you, and the most
I'm out of the big book too.
the most giving thing you can do to save the world, be of service to all of humankind, is to do what we were talking about earlier, practice abiding in yourself. Grow the light. And then you'll have a light like a Buddha, or like a Jesus, or like a Lao Tzu, or like a Sankara, or like a Robert, or like a Bhagwan.
Plus, as your concepts change, right, the form changes. So, for me, it's like...
As you move into the big eye, there are no concepts, because the little eye goes away, and the little eye is the one that has the concepts. And, there's nothing but light. While you are in the abiding, there is no I, there's only light. That was the amazing thing about Robert, is he was in that consciousness 24/7 for 50-some years.
But these are all little I concepts, like how am I of value? Whether I sponsor lots of people or whether I do my individual spiritual work, how am I of value? And I don't know, with the exception of Lee, everybody that I know who sponsors shitloads of people, I think are total egomaniacs. They don't have anything I want. You know what I mean? So maybe the best thing you can do is...
And I don't sponsor shitloads of people, I have no idea how many people I sponsor. I don't, in fact, sponsor anybody. I don't know how many people are calling me sponsor this week. And there are some people who call me sponsor that I have no sponsorship relationship with at all. And many of the people that call me sponsor, I have a teacher-student relationship with. And, the whole thing is such nonsense.
That's the way I look at it. Another thing is, well, it's kind of like the sponsor relationship that I have with you is, I've used him maybe 4 times as a sponsor in 2 years because I do the work, and if I'm doing the work and I get stuck, then I need to talk with you about it. But I don't get stuck.
And then you're coming to me not as an AA sponsor, you're coming to me as somebody who can give you some spiritual guidance.
Right. Exactly.
I consider a sponsor to be a person who takes you through the steps.
That's what I do.
You read the big book and go through the steps, and that's a very important role. And everybody should have a sponsor. You should do your 9 steps before you show up here, preferably. But
I don't want to do those things.
But oh well.
Yeah. Well, it's principle. But now.
But you're doing what you're given to do. What you do is you look right there and see who's there. And when they're there, then you see why they're there. And let them get that from you. People come to you because they see the God in you, whether or not they know it. The God in them is coming to the God in you to fulfill whatever their next step might be, which might be working the second step. Or it might be having an enlightenment experience, and you don't know, and they don't know until it happens, but there's a schedule, and everybody is on the optimal path for their spiritual growth. And if you're in your path, that means you're an optimal item for their spiritual growth at this point. You're the necessary tool for them to take this step. And nowhere in that is anybody interested in either of your opinions about how you feel about doing the next step. The fact is that I'd rather not teach this class, but here it is.
Well, one thing you said was, because when I do my meditations, first I was like, ching, and let's put on some music, and let's have all this stuff going on so that I can get quiet. And then, doing this work, I could sit in quiet. And then it turned into, I would pray for whoever came into mind. If it was the lady that crossed the street, or the kid on a skateboard, or my mom, or her, because she kept popping up. But whoever popped up in my head, I would pray for that person. And then it turned to, I would pray, and then within half an hour, it'd be a half hour of just clear, of purity. Then it was pray for 20 minutes, and then 40 minutes of pure. And then it went to 10, 15 minutes, and I was 10, 15 minutes where I could just, and then, boom, back to half an hour, so it's that little thing. And you're saying that true prayer, and I've heard this over at the Agape's, true prayer is communion with God. And then there'd be times when
They know about Joel over at Agape.
Right. You talk about it all the time.
Yeah, all the time. You bet.
So
good truth over there.
So when I would leave, there'd be times when I'm just walking around town with that feeling.
Yeah, sure. That's what I was saying. You can have that feeling at the dinner in a crowd or in a nightclub or anywhere.
Yeah. And then
it's a matter of how frequently and how you can elevate yourself.
Well, that's the hard part because
it's practice. It's practice, and to the extent that you still have a kid, there's rebellion. Because that's the other side of it, is that while you still have kid going on, there's a rebellion to this because the kid wants to do whatever the kid wants to do, and that's not been resolved. See, that has to be integrated, that whatever is driving that kid and propping that kid up and keeping that kid as a separate entity, as a little I of its own, so to speak, that is preventing you from abiding all the time. But you could have, people abide all the time and appear very normal to people that are not attuned to it. Like my friend that had the taxi cab driver from Ventura sitting in the bus seat next to him in Honolulu, nobody else was getting a lift out of the sky, Just a perfectly ordinary cab driver from Ventura sitting in the bus. Except for the guy who happened to be sitting next to him. What did you have, Lisa?
I
Please.
had a question, or an observation. It seems like when I'm in the 99.9% time I'm a kid, my existence when I'm a kid. Well, what I'm experiencing just the past few years is just a ton of the physical sickness stuff. And when I'm there, I can't lift myself out of it, and it just seems like I need to take myself someplace to be lifted.
Sure.
That's basically the only.
That's true.
So when I'm a kid, no matter what form it takes, the kid thing.
Good.
Because I can't get quiet and do the abiding business, and sometimes reading helps a little, but
you do what you need to do. I mean, if you listen to a Joel tape for an hour a day every day of your life, then you will get attuned to the point where you put on a Joel tape for 2 minutes and it'll lift you. Or if you listen to Robert, or if you listen to some spiritual being like that, and spend enough time doing it when you don't need to, so to speak, to develop that affinity with that consciousness, in other words, until he becomes your teacher, then when you listen to them for a minute or two, it will lift you. Until you do that, or if you haven't found somebody like that, and it may not be Joel or Robert that works for you, call somebody else, that can lift you, because almost anybody who's not in there with you can lift you. But that's why there are spiritual practitioners, because there are clients with the appearance of problems who can't lift themselves. That's why there are spiritual practitioners. Joel used to call his students for help once in a while. Once in a while, Joel would have an affliction, and he would call Barbara or Lorraine or somebody for help. Oh well, still human. And like I said, why did Joel wear glasses if he's such a great healer that he can heal 135 people a day for 20 years of everything from withered limbs to tuberculosis to cancer? Why didn't he fix his eyes? And his answer to that was, well, I could probably, go away into the mountains and hide out for 2 or 3 weeks and meditate and pray and work on it and resolve this problem. And there he just went 21, 3 weeks times 135 people that did not get his services because he was up worried about his eyes. And he says, it's easier to wear glasses. So, oh well, still a little bit human,
There's a funny story you told me about you. And I don't remember what you're doing, but you're in some group and you didn't say anything the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
And then 10 people came up to you and told you why you didn't speak.
Yeah, that's why I understand so well why I have no idea what people think of me at meetings, why everybody has a different opinion of me. Yeah, people will always ascribe to you the characteristics that would be theirs if they were doing the same thing. If I'm being quiet, one thinks it's because I'm afraid, one thinks it's because I think I'm better than them, and one thinks it's because I'm being holier than thou, and one thinks it's because I'm shy, and all these people are telling me, and in fact this happened, and they came up to me and told me, because it was a confrontational group that I had the nerve to be silent in. And they came up one by one, and they told me what it would mean if they were sitting there silently, and I knew exactly what they were doing, so I was totally undisturbed, which really pissed them off. And it was, quite an interesting experience, and I knew exactly what was going on, and I knew they were just telling me what it would mean if they were that way. And fortunately, the guy who was facilitating the group also knew what was going on, and knew that I knew what was going on, and knew what was going on with me and why I was being silent, and so we just sort of went and watched, and let these people one by one work out. So that's what I was talking about earlier. Mm-hmm.
I find myself less bothered by people's comments about me being quiet, and it used to be a script read for me, because I like being quiet, and I'm quiet a lot of the time, but I would get very disturbed by people saying you're very quiet, you're kind of a loner, you don't say much, you stay quiet. That was like the glitch would come, and I'm like, oh, I'm different, I'm afraid there's something wrong. I always had this dialogue going on with it. And it's just not as strong at all anymore, because I've had people say stuff like that, and I've been able to say, well, that's just their perception. It's almost like there's an internal dialogue, like he wants to think, oh, see, they think you're weird, stuff like that. And I'm like, no, it's okay to be quiet. It's different. It's not painful. It used to be quite painful.
You've done a great deal of kid work.
It was always a script.
You've done a great deal of kid work.
Yeah.
And now you say, no, it's just them, and your kid trusts you.
I go to reassurance, and
Yep.
and it's like, oh, okay, my kid entertains possibility.
Your kid trusts you.
Yeah.
See, in fact, in the situation that I was in, I was higher than a kite. The fact is, I knew exactly where I was. I was just as high as I could possibly be because of something I'd been doing before that. I don't mean alcoholically or drug high. I mean, I was spiritually very high because I'd been in an intensive group for 3 days, and I was still way up there. And so I was, bulletproof. So that gave me this great clarity to watch. I didn't give a shit. I knew exactly where I was, and I was bulletproof. And so I just watched these people, and it was so nice that they did that for me, because they made that syndrome so clear that I've always known that. What you think of me tells me more about you than it does about me. What you say about me tells me a great deal about you. What you say about her tells me more about you than it does about her.
I was in a meeting the other day, and it was going around the room, and it came my turn to share. And the topic was the 12th step. And I just wanted to share about how last Friday afternoon I was in tears all afternoon. And I just kept crying, and I let myself cry, and I let myself feel the feelings, and I went through it, and what it felt like, and the 12th step came in that I called my sponsor, and my sponsor carried the message to me, and then I saw a light, and I started to feel better, and that sometimes I'm the one who's carrying the message when somebody calls me, and sometimes I'm the person receiving the message, and I was done. I was done sharing, and 2 more people shared, and then the meeting ended, and 6 or 7 or 8 different girls came over to me to tell me, how much they liked my sharing or how much they related to it or whatever. And 2 out of those people came over. One of them said, depression can be a really sad thing, and this and this. And then another one came over and said, more women that work out of the home are depressed than women that work out in the business world. All these foreign things to me that had nothing to do with me. And I just spent the last 2 days going over those 2 and thinking, am I depressed? And finally, my husband and I were making dinner together tonight, and I asked him, I just told him about that, just to check and make sure, and he looked at me like, what? Yesterday somebody told me you're the happiest person I've ever seen in my life.
They're depressed.
And so now I see.
Excuse me a second. No, they're depressed. I'll be right.
That's their.
Who else wants a break? Go ahead.
That's their view. And it has nothing to do with me. It's like,
Well, see, this context that we're speaking on, if I said this a while ago when I did all my kid work, my question was, are they reading my script, or is it their resistance behavior? Which is they're coming up to me saying something so that I'll accept them or validate them, And really I'm just going, okay, you're in resistance behavior, so I'm not going to respond or react and read your script, but I'm okay with who I am because you're just saying the reflection. And that was something I got. I was confused in the beginning, but then I listened to some Robert, and it was, Robert said, don't believe anything I say. Experience the truth for yourself, and that's kind of what I got. But then reflecting it off people, because I'm insane. I think I'm just insane. And in my human form. So I would ask a question like what you asked. Am I depressed? Because in my human form,
Well, it just really made me see how what you were saying at the beginning of the class is true. Everybody, it's like when people see you, they are just seeing a reflection of what their opinions and concepts are.
That's right.
And it's not just you, it's everybody.
Oh, yeah. What we've been talking about is the spiritual axiom that we base all this work on. You see that everybody's experience is not picturing the content of their own consciousness. If you expect people to be depressed because you're always depressed, then if they say they're quiet, you say, aha, depressed. Or, you hear what you're listening for. You make your own world. So what you do is you learn to know who you are yourself. I couldn't be less interested in anything than I am in who finds me difficult and who finds me this and that and everything, How silly.
Especially when you know where it comes from. It's just their conscience and opinion from wherever they grew up and however they grew up.
Or what they had for dinner. Maybe they're having a gastrointestinal problem. I don't know. It certainly has nothing to do with me. I am who I am. People who want to don't have trouble getting close to me. So if I'm standoffish, it's probably because you're standing off.
question.
All right.
I said to this girl, like in the dating situation, I said, most women, if they can't get to a higher level of consciousness, they're not going to last long in my life. And she took it as, I'm better than you and you suck. But that's not what I meant. All I was saying is that... But all I was saying is that, if I can't, like, when I was smoking crack, I can go up to a girl that doesn't smoke crack, that has never done drugs in her life, that's been in church, and say, hey, you want to go out and be my girlfriend? Because she would just go, there's something wrong with you. And I was like, grew spiritually, the women got prettier and more healthy, their face were, pretty skin, they're not all clammy and everything. And that's what I meant, is but then now, I think I have this thing that people think that I'm thinking that I'm better than them. And I've heard it a few times.
Well, it doesn't matter what you mean. It matters what you say.
I don't even say anything.
No, what you just said. And then you want to explain what you mean by it.
Oh, to her?
Yeah, it doesn't matter what you mean. It matters what you say.
No, there's people that at work that go, showing that guy over there, he said something about me, and I've never even talked to the guy. He's like at high 40s. And I've heard this other places. So I'm wondering, what am I doing that, oh, I see.
Either,
Oh, I see.
either you're radiating script or nothing.
Or they're saying this is how I would be if I was in Sean's people.
Either you're radiating script and they're reading it for you, or you're not doing anything. And they're telling you what it would be if they were doing that.
Yeah,
And you can tell the difference by the glitch.
but there wasn't any. I was just like, oh.
And it's just opinions and concepts rattling around, bouncing off of you. Let's get quiet. Okay, thank you. I love you all.